Hello and welcome back to the season premiere of Buffalo Sports Insider. I'm your host, Richie Miller, joined here by my co-hosts Thomas Bailey, Evan Harrington, and Alex Miley. Today, we're going to open up today's show by talking about the Bills. When we left off last season, they were 6-6. People were worrying we might not make the playoffs from there. We won 5 straight. We won the division and beat the Steelers in the wild card game, all just to lose again to the Kansas City Chiefs, our third loss to them in the Allen Mahomes era in the playoffs. We lost 27-24. Just a terrible miss in clutch time by Tyler Bass. And I'm just going to start off with a loaded question off the bat. Do you think in the Mahomes era, where the Chiefs had pretty much established themselves as the dynasty of the AFC, there are a bunch of other good young quarterbacks in the AFC, whether it be Burrow's Bengals, the Chargers just signed Harbaugh as their coach. Lamar and the Ravens are still pretty good. DeMeco Ryans and C.J. Stroud established themselves in Houston this season. Do you think the Bills could make, much less win, a Super Bowl in the Josh Allen era?
I'm going to say straight up yes. I think that there's a good chance that we can. I think that there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. Of course, like coaching plays a big factor. I mean, I didn't like some of the play calls in our loss in the divisional round. I'm sure a lot of people didn't. There is a lot of mistakes to fix up, though, like the drops from Diggs and Sherfield, the miss from Bass, of course. There's a lot that goes into it. We have a really big offseason ahead of us with a lot of pending free agents. So I think this offseason is going to be a very big determining factor in determining if the Buffalo Bills can win a Super Bowl with Josh Allen at quarterback with the rest of this team. I think it's going to come down to what these guys can do when it comes to the playoffs, because it seems like every year we find a different way to lose.
I agree with that completely. I think this offseason is extremely important. They have to find a way to get out of cap troubles. They have a lot of free agents. They have some older players they have to try and replace. But this offseason, I feel like we're in a much better place than we were last offseason, as we don't have as many holes. If you look back at last offseason, when we were looking into the draft and free agent, there was a question mark at every position but quarterback. This season, I don't think that's true. I think we've been able to get more talent around Josh Allen. He finally has an actual offensive line and a great run game. And I do believe that we can still win a Super Bowl under the Allen era. The defense has a lot more questions than the offense this year, but with a defensive-minded coach and we still have a lot of good players, I think we'll be able to figure it out. I would like to pass it off to Evan.
Yeah, I mean, I agree as well. I mean, you take a look back at Josh Allen's season this year, you can argue that he was the MVP of the league, right? 4,800 total yards, 44 touchdowns. It doesn't get much better than that. So what I'm trying to allude to is that when you have a quarterback like 17, Josh Allen, your Super Bowl window will always be open. And I think one thing that people forget about the Buffalo Bills is that they really just got onto the scene less than 4 years ago, right? During the COVID year, 2020 was really the first year where Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and this Buffalo Bills team kind of established themselves on the mountain of top contending teams, not only in the AFC, but the NFL. And yes, there's been a few disappointments within the postseason the last few years, but they're right there, right? And I know that 15 over in Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and Travis Kelce and the guys over there have kind of, put a little bit of a blockage in the Buffalo Bills pathway to the Super Bowl. But once again, when you have a guy like Josh Allen at the helm, you're always going to have a chance to get to the Super Bowl. Yes, it's been disappointing the last 3 seasons, especially 3 losses, like you mentioned, Richie, there over to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. But once again, when you have 17, there's always going to be the chance for you to get to the promised land of the Super Bowl.
All right, before we get into the pending free agents, I would just like to talk about our hirings in the coaching side of things. So interim offensive coordinator Joe Brady was made the full-time offensive coordinator going into next year. And then this year we will have an official defensive coordinator, Bobby Babich, who has been within the Bill system for a while. What do we think of these hires and really staying within our coaching staff, but this time Babich having a lot more freedom in the play calling? What do we think of these hires as a whole?
I love the move because Babich knows a lot of our system, and especially since, like you said, he's been in the system of Buffalo for a long time now. I mean, having Sean McDermott as both the normal head coach and the defensive coordinator, it's a lot to put on one guy. it can be maybe factoring into why we didn't have as great of a season from him. As we know, McDermott has been the reason why this team turned around in the first place back in 2017, being a first-year head coach, to be able to make the type of run that we made, to make it to the playoffs with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback. There's a lot that goes into that, and I think that we can see that team get back to that old mentality where we don't need to rely too much on McDermott to do both. And I like that for Bobby Babich. On the opposite side, though, Joe Brady, I love the hiring of that as well. I like the way he incorporated James Cook into the run game, but not completely taking Allen out like Ken Dorsey did. And because of that, I feel like I really like the move for the Buffalo Bills. I think this offense is going to start clicking more often. I think Josh Allen's going to be able to make his plays that we know he can make. And I like the offensive and defensive hirings for the Buffalo Bills.
I completely agree with that. I love the Babich move more because with him as position coaches, he was position coach for the safeties up until 2021. You saw how well Hyde and Poyer, who were not big names, they were playing at all-pro and Pro Bowl levels. And then last season, he makes the switch to linebackers coach, and you see Milano jump out of there, make a huge jump. Tremaine Edmonds had his best season. For this year, Bernard and Dodson both made huge jumps. So I think now that he has full control over that defense, he's going to be able to get the best out of everyone instead of just a certain position group. And then for Brady, I like the hire. I think he did a great job of taking the pressure off of Allen, so we didn't have to rely on him so much. But still, when it came down to him, let him take those deep shots like he did in the Chiefs game. We relied a lot on the run game, a lot of those screens, the short passes to keep the chains moving, so we didn't get behind in the third and longs and the second and longs we did with Dorsey that would just kill the drives. He did a great job of making it 3rd and 5, and then it's Allen, go make a play. And with Allen, that usually is what happens.
Yeah, so obviously I can only add so much to what you guys talked about defensively, coaching wise, but offensively, the point I want to make here, obviously bringing back Joe Brady, obviously the interim offensive coordinator here, but he brought in one of his own guys, in Ronald Curry, an outside hire. It's something normally we don't see too often with the Buffalo Bills. A lot of inside organizational hires is what the Bills tend to do. But I think the one thing with Joe Brady allowing to pick his own staff here is that Sean McDermott, we've heard the rumors that he's too involved in the offense. He's kind of too involved with his positional staff, and he doesn't let them do what they should do, I guess, and have the full reign and control of their positional groups. And now I think with Joe Brady here full-time officially, he brings in Ronald Curry, who he had time with, over at LSU and stuff. It's a big hire. I really think that allowing Joe Brady to do what he does and having full reins and full control of his offense going forward as the full-time offensive coordinator, I think it's great.
So going back into Babich's defense, you have Milano returning from injury next year. You have Terrell Bernard, who's shown signs of becoming a great linebacker. Trey White, we're still yet to see what happens with him this offseason, but he is still under contract and should be coming back. But on that defensive side, every defensive lineman except for Ed Oliver, Greg Rousseau, and Von Miller is set to be a free agent. Micah Hyde essentially posted a note basically indicating that he won't be back with Buffalo, whether that's free agency or retirement, we're yet to see. But this defense could look very different next year. So I just would like to get your overall senses on what we should do to improve the defense for next season.
That can really go a lot of ways, and I think it's going to come down to how Brandon Beane handles the specific cap situation we're in. We're in a really, really bad cap situation. We have a lot of guys that are making a lot of different money. We're going to have to restructure deals if we want to even make a rather unconvincing signing in free agency, whether that be like a backup quarterback or something. We don't even have money to do anything like that. We're going to have to find a way to make the money work, and right now I believe in Brandon Beane to do that. He's done that every other year past. He cleared up enough space to sign Von Miller. Well, that wasn't the best move, looking back on it now in hindsight, but realistically, that was a good move at the time for us. It was $20 million, $120 million all the way overall. And I like the way that Brandon Beane works when it comes to this. So I think that realistically, we got to at least bring back a D lineman. I think probably, obviously, like you said, Hyde's going to be gone. I don't really know what we'll do about safety. I think we could draft a safety potentially. There's Cameron Kitchens. There's a lot that you can go into with the safety position, maybe even a Kyle Duggar. We've had interest in him in the past when it came to the draft. So we'll see what they really do there. But I think that it's going to come down to what Bean does in this re-sign phase.
I completely believe in Bean also, as he alluded to. Every year, Bean has been able to get us out of these cap problems. I think this year is big because if we don't make any splash signings, we obviously don't have the money. Just bring back a couple of veterans to fill out the roster, and then next year is really the year they can get out of cap troubles with the Von Miller deal, Trey White deal, the Stephon Diggs deal. They're getting towards the end, and we can really start to distance ourselves from the problems we have this year. But I think in free agency / like re-signing, I think we need to focus on D-line, and then like safety or depth players I think we can focus on in the draft. I think D-line is extremely important that we bring back our top players that are set to be free agents like Epinesa and Floyd and DaQuan Jones. I think they were key parts of us having one of the best pass rushes in the league and not being as bad against the run as we had been in years prior. So I think that's extremely important. And then in the draft, we can go get a safety. We can maybe go get another corner, go get another linebacker, fill out the other positions that we need, and not have to worry about defensive line as much.
Yeah, taking a look at the cap situation here, obviously, like we mentioned, the guys like Hyde, Jones, Epinesa, and Floyd, those are the big four names defensively for the Buffalo Bills. My take on that personally, I think the Bills are going to try to almost nickel and dime their way through free agency in the sense like a guy like Taylor Rapp, right? We saw him make plays for this Bills defense down the stretch. He was filling in for positional play when he had to. So I can see the Bills trying to bring him back on a 1 or 2 year contract and maybe drafting a safety later in the draft, or maybe trying to convert a guy like Kyer Elam to safety and giving that a go. You never know what they can do. Honestly, we know how Sean McDermott's really good at developing defensive backs. We could see something like that, but the defensive line wise, I really think we're going to have to say goodbye to one of the three guys. I think one. I think the Bills are going to bring back DaQuan Jones just because we saw how dynamic he was with Ed Oliver to his side. But I think it's really, Leonard Floyd or AJ Epinesa. One of those two, I think, are going to sign with another team. But I think what the Bills are going to try to do, that goes back to my nickel or dime point, is they're going to draft a defensive lineman in the second or third round. And some fans might be a little frustrated with that because we've seen it in years past. But I just think that's what the Bills are going to have to do because you're not going to be able to sign a guy like Floyd, who had 10.5 sacks, like you mentioned, or AJ Epinesa, who made big-time splash plays. Like, we're going to have to say goodbye to one of these guys, and that's almost, that is kind of a rough situation to be in, but that just also shows you how far into this Josh Allen era we've almost become now because you have contracts like Diggs, Allen, Dawkins, the Miller one, obviously, Jordan Poyer's big contract. At Oliver, obviously, we got Dawson Knox. There's a lot of these big contracts, and sometimes you're going to have to just sacrifice players to free agency that you may or may not want to.
All right, so when we get into our cap issues, specifically with guys like Von Miller and Dawson Knox, are there any guys that you could see taking a pay cut for us next year?
I would say that one player that I think would take a pay cut is Dion Dawkins. Dawkins is set to make right around, I believe, 17-ish million, somewhere along those lines. He got a massive extension a couple years ago, and it's finally going to start kicking in because it was backloaded, meaning that most of the money was paid in the back end of his contract rather than front. Because of that, I think Dawkins, knowing the guy he is, the type of player he is, he's been our Walter Payton Man of the Year guy for a long time now, too. There's a lot of stuff that can be greatly said about Dion Dawkins' character. I think it's just almost a given that a player like Dawkins could do a pay cut if he's really going to have to. I think there's a lot that we have to do in this offseason, and I think it's going to take these kinds of players to make it all work.
Yeah, I could definitely see Dawkins taking a pay cut. Two of the other people that I could see also taking one would be either Diggs or Von Miller. Not saying it's very likely, but with how disappointing they were towards the end of the season, I think that Bean's going to try and have a conversation with them and basically ask them if they'd be willing to take a pay cut to try and help us for next season. I saw some reports that Bean might talk to Diggs about taking one that he won't be very happy about. I don't know if that'll be true, but this is just something I saw the other day. But there's no real clear cut for anyone who would be taking a pay cut other than maybe, as you mentioned, Dawkins.
Yeah, I guess mine would have to be Dawson Knox. Obviously, we know Dawson Knox. He's
4 year, 44. Oh, man. Yeah, big contract he signed.
Yeah, right. Obviously, we know Dawson Knox is a very dynamic player and he can make plays. But the reality is here the Bills drafted a first round tight end, Dalton Kincaid. And Dawson Knox is the number two, whether people, want to just kind of admit that. He's the number two guy in Buffalo. And I don't think there's any chance here over the next 2 years he reestablished himself as the number one guy, unless Kincaid gets an injury in the future. Knock on wood, he doesn't. But I think the Bills have to have that conversation with Dawson Knox. At the time, he signed a number one tight end type of contract. But after that, he's playing like a number two.
That
tight end
kind of
contract.
confuses me too. Like, why would we go out there, sign him, and then draft Kincaid? It's a
And
little weird,
and
but,
the thing, and I think the thing is Dawson Knox is you want to keep him around here. You want to have that dynamic two tight end set that they've been clamoring on running for a couple of years now. And to do that full time with adding other players, I think Dawson Knox may have to take a contract.
All right, so I would just like to wrap up today's show with one last question. The biggest free agent that we haven't talked about on the offensive end, Gabriel Davis, is set to become a free agent. We saw him arguing with fans after the Chiefs game. Some people have had some issues with him because he's not dynamic enough. But then again, you could remember a couple years ago that 200-yard, 4-touchdown game. With the signs that Shakir's shown improvement and a lot of good receivers set to be in the first round where we pick, what would you do in terms of the Gabriel Davis situation? Would you try to restructure his contract, or would you let him walk?
I'm letting him walk, and it's not even a debate for me anymore. It's just Gabe Davis is too inconsistent for this team. I mean, a lot of people have sat there and complained about Stephon Diggs even, like not showing up near the end of the season, things like that. And I mean, when you got a player like Stephon Diggs caliber, it's understandable, like he still went over 1,000 yards, things like that. But you got a player like Gabriel Davis who's never really been that guy ever. Like, he's never been the number one guy in any team's offense. He's not going to be that kind of player. And I feel like he's going to want around $12 to $15 million. And I feel like it's just too much money to pay a guy who's been realistically like hit or miss. It's a lot like, for example, the Buffalo Sabres, where like they'll play good one game and then bad the next. Like, they're very inconsistent. It happens with Gabe Davis. It happens with the Bills as well. It happens to all of Buffalo sports, really. But I think that Gabe Davis mainly here is going to basically just be too inconsistent for my liking. I think that if we plan on doing anything with Gabe Davis, that it'd have to be him taking a major pay cut in order to stay in Buffalo.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think he should come back at all. He was playing more like a wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 at the end of this year and was asking for going to ask for wide receiver 2 money. Shakir outplayed him. Diggs, even with the struggles, still definitely outplayed him. And this receiving class is extremely deep. I think we can get a guy first, second, even third round that can produce what Gabe Davis had this past year. Because the problem with this Bills receiving room is everyone would put their top corner on Diggs, they'd bracket Diggs, and then it would be, okay, Gabe Davis, go and try and get open. And he would have trouble consistently creating downfield separation, and it would just stall the offense. So I completely agree. I don't think Gabe Davis should be brought back at all.
Yeah, I kind of teeter-tottered on the thought of this throughout the year, but as we kind of found our way towards the end of the year, and with the Diggs struggling and the Shakir uprising and the uprising of Kincaid and also the emergence of James Cook, we saw some pass catchers for Buffalo, kind of find themselves in more elevated roles, and we saw Gabe Davis just kind of fall down the roster spots. And then the depth charts of this receiver room. Now, yes, Davis, phenomenal blocker, best blocking receiver on this team. He can put up good numbers. He can have big games. We get that. But at the end of the day, when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen that needs plays consistently, that needs guys to help him out, I just cannot deal with the inconsistencies that their team brings. And it's one thing if Davis wanted, like, again, receiver 3 or 4 money, heartbeat, I'd resign him. But if he's going to ask for $12 or $15 million a year, you might as well just go out and get a guy in the first or second round of the NFL draft and, have that be your replacement for Gabe Davis.
And sorry, real quick, but think about it for like a standpoint. Like, they do this all the time with number 1 receivers. What makes you think we shouldn't do it with a number 2? Like, look at the Titans doing it with A.J. Brown. I mean, sure, they probably regretted it after year 1, things like that. But, I mean, realistically, that's just kind of where we're at. And, I mean, when you got such a talented receiver class, it just doesn't make any sense to bring a guy back 12 to 15 mil when we have so many other pending free agents that we could spend that money on. it's not making any sense to me. I mean, as he said, as the season went along, I feel like there was just realistically no way we could do it, especially after the kind of season he had. It just doesn't make any sense.
I would wholeheartedly agree. And as we're talking about the wide receiver class of this year, I would stay tuned to BuffaloSportsInsider.com. There will be a lot of upcoming articles and scouting reports on some of the wide receivers in this year's draft. And with that, I think we will conclude today's show. I've been Richie Miller, your host. Thank you to Thomas Bailey, Evan Harrington, and Alex Smiley for joining me today. And that'll be a wrap on the season premiere of Buffalo Sports Insider.